Let's bring in Daniel Mulino now. He's chair of the Standing Committee on Economics. A lot to talk about. Let's start with the NDIS and the challenges there. It's a target, not a cap, but clearly quite central to the government's broader budget numbers, given the trajectory of the expenditure relating to the NDIS.
Oh, exactly. But look, I think what the opposition's doing here in a desperate attempt for any kind of relevance is grasping at an attempt at semantics. But look, I think what Bill's made clear all the way through this is that he's very focused on reforms that mean that the NDIS can continue to provide people with the support that they need, but that the scheme is sustainable in the broader budget context. And right from the get-go, he's focused on a whole range of reforms, including reforms that look at where there are participants in the scheme that aren't reputable, that aren't providing what they should. He's looked at a range of measures that are broader adjustments to the scheme as part of the review that he's undertaken to provide people with more sustainability over the longer term. So he's very committed to that 8% target. I think the point he was trying to make is that that's not changing the fundamental nature of the scheme, which is that it's not a capped scheme.
On the broader economy now, we're seeing mixed numbers. Yesterday, the inflation number down for the month, yet the retail figures up. Are you worrying that the RBA is going to move again and hike rates next week?
Look, I actually think the retail figures and the inflation figures are pretty consistent with each other. If you look at the retail figures, that saw a year-on-year increase of just over 4%. I think the monthly increase was 0.7%. But if you go back to late last year and early this year, the year-on-year increases that we saw in retail were double digits. So when you look at a graph of the year-on-year increases in retail, it's actually been tracking down pretty consistently over the last year, and that's exactly what you'd expect with a series of interest rate rises. And this is consistent with all the evidence that I'm hearing out in the community, people I talk to, but also all the evidence you see around people shifting from more discretionary spending to essentials. So the year-on-year changes in retail have actually been tracking down pretty consistently over the last 10 months or so. And that's exactly what you'd expect to see when you see monthly inflation figures also tracking down. And monthly inflation figures have tracked down from 8.4% in December last year to 5.6%. So that's a pretty significant decrease over that 6-month period.
You hear from a lot more people than most on the state of the economy. You get a good sense of where things are at. Given last October, the interest rate was meant to be at 3%, and then in May it was 3.85%. Now the official cash rate's 4.1%. Consensus is it gets to 4.6%. Where are things at? Are things cooling down enough for the RBA to take the foot off the interest rate accelerator?
Well, look, I think based on all the people I talk to, both in the public sector and the private sector and in the community, I think one thing everybody could agree on is that this is a difficult environment in which to forecast. And that's true in Australia, it's true around the world. We're dealing with a lot of international factors that are tricky to forecast, tricky to estimate where they're going to be in 3, 6, 12 months' time. But what I would say is, if you look at the bigger picture, if you step back for a moment, the goal has been over the last 12 months plus that we walk this narrow path, as a number of people have described it, where we see inflation come down to where it needs to be in that band of 2 to 3% over the next 18 to 24 months, but that we achieve that in a way that sees the least possible disruption to the economy. So we want to see unemployment go up as least as possible in achieving that goal. And we also want to see people in the most vulnerable situation provided with cost of living relief where possible along the way. And I think if you look at it in that bigger picture, we've seen inflation on those monthly numbers come down a lot from 8.4 to 5.6. We've seen unemployment not yet increase substantially, so that's a good thing. And while everybody expects unemployment will eventually go up a bit, it's really welcome that it's still got a 3 in front of it. And the government's fiscal strategy, which is to significantly strengthen the budgetary position by going from almost 80 billion deficit to a surplus. We've achieved that while at the same time providing cost of living relief for those who are most vulnerable. So my position would be that if you look at that narrow path we're trying to walk, see inflation reduced while providing support along the way, I think that's broadly being achieved.
Should the government start to rein in expectations on wage increases, though? Because that's one of the worries Governor Lowe talks about, wage increases without a parallel increase in productivity.
So I think two sides to that. One is, I think the wage increases we've seen to date have been below inflation. When you look at the increase in the minimum wage, when you look at increases across a range of awards. So I think broadly people are being very measured, and people are seeking wage increases that I think are consistent with that overarching strategy. I think Governor Lowe rightly makes the point that if we want to see higher wages growth over the medium to longer term, we need to see higher productivity growth rates. So there, I think the government is undertaking a range of important policy measures, like investing in the clean energy transition and providing targets that stimulate investment, the investment in skills. And I'll give House Economics Committee a free plug here by saying that our main focus over the last year has been on promoting competition in the economy. And we're holding public hearings in Toowoomba tomorrow with non-Big Four banks and airlines. So we're investigating a range of ways in which we can boost competition and economic dynamism. So I'm totally supportive of the notion that we, in addition to navigating inflation over the next 12 to 24 months, we need to be boosting productivity as the best way of supporting higher wages growth over the long term.
Daniel Mulino, Chair of the Standing Committee on Economics in the Federal Parliament. Thanks. Talk to you soon.